President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are the presumptive nominees for the Democratic Party and Republican Party in the 2024 presidential election. One of them will be the President of the United States by January of 2025. It is up to the American people to decide who they want to elect. And those Americans who are well tuned into politics already likely know the two political positions of both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States, has cast himself as a mainstream Democrat and has been increasingly shifting towards the left ever since his political career started. On social issues such as abortion, he has made clear that he is very pro-choice and supportive of women's ability to have an abortion, as you can see with his criticism of the Supreme Court following the overruling of Roe v. Wade in 2022. He has also made clear his support for an assault weapons ban and further restrictions on the process of purchasing a gun, as well as his support for police reform and BLM, which was more of an issue back in 2020 than it is now. He has also made clear that he is a supporter of the LGBTQ plus movement, especially with regards to gay rights, and has signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which basically gave gay people the right to marry and have the same rights as straight people in the United States. Also, with regards to immigration, he has made clear that he is, while he has said that he supports the rule of law with regards to immigration, he also has stated that he would support being more compassionate towards people who have come to the United States illegally, and has indicated that he isn't in favor of mass deportations and would actually be willing to move forward with a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants in the United States. When it comes to economic issues, Joe Biden has made pretty much clear that he is a blue-collar Democrat when it comes to economic issues. He supports protectionist tariffs on goods coming in from China and other countries, which is roughly in line with the views of his predecessors on tariffs. However, at the same time, he also favors massive spending, such as like trillion-dollar bills with regards to the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, and he also supports using the government to lower healthcare prices. And he's without a doubt one of the most progressive Democrats to have ever received the nomination for the party. Also, on climate change, he has argued that the United States should invest more in clean energy and renewable energy and move away from coal and oil. So Joe Biden is arguably the most progressive person that the Democrats have nominated yet, ever since the party was first organized. And he's also made himself very internationalist with regards to foreign policy, and he supports maintaining current U.S. alliances and also being heavily involved in foreign affairs, such as in Ukraine, where he supports continuing assistance towards President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, and he supports the idea that the United States needs to spread democracy across the world. This has been a consistent theme throughout his whole political career. On the other hand, Donald Trump, who is the frontrunner for the Republican nomination, actually the presumptive nominee, has made clear that on the issue of abortion, he wants it to be up to each individual state, and that each state should have the ability to decide what they want to do with abortion. Also, on the issue of guns, he has been a huge supporter of the NRA. The NRA has supported him, and he has opposed any sort of gun legislation that would make the process of purchasing of any sort of firearm more difficult. Also, back in 2020, he framed himself as the law and order candidate and opposed police reform and called for order on the streets. Also, with regards to the LGBT movement, he's actually arguably been the most progressive Republican, ironically enough, on the issue of LGBT rights, and actually has been very pro-gay marriage ever since his 2016 run for president. However, on the issue of trans rights, he has largely been against that. When it comes to the border, this has been his signature issue, immigration and the border. He has announced that he opposes illegal immigration and has floated the idea of using mass deportations, and of course supports a border wall to separate the United States and Mexico to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. And when it comes to economics, he's actually largely aligned with the old GOP before Reagan when it comes to the idea of protectionism, and he's drawn parallels between himself and William McKinley when it comes towards imposing protectionist tariffs on goods coming in from other countries. He has actually recently floated that he would actually want the United States to transition entirely towards protectionist tariffs and repeal the income tax, which was the system before Woodrow Wilson became president. And he's also actually been surprisingly pro-union for a Republican nominee, which he didn't really translate too much into his governance, but when it comes towards campaigning, he has tried to make himself appear as pro-union and in support of infrastructure bills. But as a whole, when it came towards Trump's actual governance from 2017 to 2021, he governed more so as a traditional Republican in those 4 years when it came towards economic issues. He supported tax cuts for wealthy Americans as well as corporations, which weren't really economically populist issues. The only real economically populist issue that he really carried out was the idea of protectionist tariffs. Donald Trump on foreign policy has largely been more isolationist and non-interventionist than past Republicans, especially with regards to the idea of maintaining old alliances. And he has also wanted to stay out of the Russia-Ukraine war and has been more open to new alliances with historic enemies of the United States. So that's what Joe Biden and Donald Trump believe now. But what have they actually believed? Like, what are their actual political positions, not just what they're saying they are? Well, to find them, we can look at how they were when they were younger, both when Joe Biden was started in the Senate in the 1970s and when Donald Trump ran for president in 2000 under the Reform Party. Their political positions then likely reflect what they actually believe on the issues. Now, let's start with Joe Biden because he's had a much longer career in politics than Donald Trump has. He was first elected to the Senate in Delaware in 1972, which was actually during Nixon's presidency, and these were his stances. When it came towards social issues as a whole, he tended to mostly base his policies off of Catholicism and the Catholic Church because he himself is a Catholic. And when it came towards the issue of race relations, this is an issue where Biden was critically hit in the 2020 Democratic primaries. He faced attacks from Kamala Harris, who is now his VP, on this issue because he actually aligned with segregationists such as James Eastland when it came towards blocking busing and was very anti-busing during this time. Even though it is to be understood that the vast majority of Joe Biden's constituents in Delaware, especially white constituents, were opposed to busing, and Joe Biden kind of had to play this if he wanted to get elected. But at the same time, the significance of his opposition to busing to the point where he actually authored laws and pushed for Congress to pass anti-busing legislation instead of just passively going along with it suggests that Joe Biden's opposition to busing was actually sincere. However, on other civil rights issues such as integration, de jure segregation, as well as civil rights, he has largely been a supporter of civil rights, with the exception of busing. When it came towards criminal issues, Joe Biden was actually known to be a hardliner on crime before the 2020 election. He was, in fact, the author of the 1994 crime bill, which was also known as the Biden crime bill. This largely increased sentencing, increased the funding for prisons, and actually made the criminal justice system much more tough than it already was. He's also been known as a drug warrior and actually criticized Ronald Reagan, of all people, for not going hard enough on the war on drugs. So, the actual policy position of Joe Biden regarding crime is actually much more tough and much more severe on crime than he is right now. Also, when it comes towards education, he actually supported No Child Left Behind, which was a policy by George W. Bush. However, otherwise, he has largely been a supporter of teachers' unions and was largely economically liberal outside of his support for No Child Left Behind. When it came towards guns, he's always been a supporter of limiting assault weapons as well as other guns. He's always been a supporter of limiting the right of Americans to own and buy guns. Also, when it comes towards illegal immigration, he actually, earlier on in his career, he stated that he supported the rule of law, which is just what he's saying now. But also, he supported tougher border policies, but he was open to a pathway to citizenship for the illegal immigrants already living in the United States. This is more so a moderate stance today than it is a extreme one. Also, he supported Ronald Reagan's immigration law in 1986, which did, of course, give a pathway to citizenship to illegal immigrants who were already living in the United States, but also strengthened border security policies. When it comes towards abortion, this is actually where Joe Biden has shifted the most of any issue. Starting off in his career, Joe Biden was actually an opponent of abortion and was largely pro-life. He actually opposed Roe versus Wade and thought that the Supreme Court should overrule the case, and he supported a constitutional amendment that would make abortion go to the states, and he also supported the Hyde Amendment, which would defund Planned Parenthood, as well as further funds for the federal government to go towards abortion. When it comes towards LGBT rights, Joe Biden has always been relatively wishy-washy on the issue. Starting in the 1970s, he actually was against gay marriage and LGBT rights, but that makes sense considering how most Americans during this time were. But also, he sorry about that. Unlike many politicians who wanted to completely ban gay marriage through a constitutional amendment, Joe Biden actually supported letting each state decide for itself regarding gay marriage, which is, ironically enough, a more conservative stance on gay marriage than Donald Trump right now. When it comes towards economics, Joe Biden has always been a liberal on economic issues. This is likely because his views have been influenced by past Democrats such as Franklin D. Roosevelt and LBJ. He has always been consistently pro-union. He's also supported banking regulations on banks and regulations on corporations. Although he has been open to compromise on these issues, it's very clear that his political positions regarding economics are very liberal. When it comes towards climate change, he also largely supported the Democrat plank on climate change, which was, of course, to move towards more renewable and clean energy, and as well as the acknowledgement that climate change and global warming are real, and the idea of entering into agreements with other countries. This is different from the Republican stance now, so he's always been relatively pro-environmental regulations. So as a whole, Joe Biden's political positions have largely been socially moderate to even conservative, but have been largely fiscally liberal. Now let's go to Donald Trump. Donald Trump largely based his political positions off of Ross Perot, who in many ways who actually started the Reform Party that Donald Trump ran with in 2000. For example, Donald Trump supported raising taxes on the rich by a tremendous amount, despite he himself being a part of this class. He's also always been a supporter of protectionist tariffs. Ever since he first talked about politics, he's always been a supporter of protectionism. Also, with regards to foreign affairs, he's actually identified North Korea as the main enemy of the United States rather than China, which is his stance now. And he's actually, the perception of Donald Trump as being a dovish on military issues is actually false. Donald Trump has always been relatively hawkish on foreign policy issues. It's just the way in which he's hawkish is different than most politicians. Most politicians are more idealistic towards foreign policy, and they support intervening to save democracy and sort. But Donald Trump has been much more like the United States should get involved militarily if our interests are at hand. Like he, in fact, even supported invading parts of Africa and the Middle East so that the United States can gain access to the oil in the area. So, but yeah, he's always been relatively hawkish on foreign policy. It's a misconception that he's a dove on military policy. In fact, he's claimed that he was always opposed to the Iraq War. This is actually false because in 2001, right after 9/11 and all of that, he actually supported an invasion into Iraq. And it was only later, when it was clear that the war wasn't going well, that he supported getting out of Iraq. And he's also always been pro-gay marriage, and he actually supported allowing gay people to serve in the military during his 2000 run for president. And he also supported universal health care, which is pretty unique, considering how now he's much more conservative on the health care issue. And when it comes towards immigration, he did support greater border security, but just like Joe Biden back then, he also supported a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants who are currently living in the United States. So there you go. Those are the political positions of Donald Trump and Joe Biden based off of what they actually believe, not on what they are saying. Joe Biden is actually, interestingly enough, more conservative than Donald Trump if you look at what they actually believe. It's just that as the Democratic Party has moved left, Joe Biden has also moved left. And as a whole, Joe Biden is a socially moderate to socially conservative, while fiscally liberal Democrat. While Donald Trump, on the other hand, is likely a socially liberal and also fiscally liberal by his economic stances, just in a very unique way. So there you go. Those are the political positions of both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel.